Welcome to Uncork Your Mind. I'm Debbie Giaquindo. I'm the Hudson Valley Wine Goddess. And in this episode, we're going to learn all about the Jumilla region of Spain. It's spelled Jumilla, and it's pronounced Jumilla. I attended a great master class, and I'm going to share that master class with you. If you have not tasted the wines from this region, they are wonderful. They're predominantly Monastrell grape, dominant, but they also grow Syrah. They grow 8 varieties of reds and 8 varieties of whites in this region. So without further ado, here is the master class, and I really do hope you learned some things about this special region.
Welcome to Uncork Your Mind, where we take the intimidation out of wine with your host, Debbie Giaquindo, the Hudson Valley Wine Goddess.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. It's a huge pleasure to be here with you today in New York City, in Little Spain market. I hope that this seminar gives you a great overview of Jumilla wines, of our precious wine region, and of course that you love the wines you're going to taste with Evan and me. And as he said, any questions, please feel free to ask them, or later at the bar C, we'll be happy to continue the discussion. So, okay, let's start first of all to locate us where we are. For some of you, Jumilla is maybe a mystery region, so for some of you, I know that some of you have been there, visit us already. Jumilla lies in the middle of La Mancha Plateau on the way to the Mediterranean. We are close to the coast, but yet inland, 60 miles inland, which gives us a very differentiated climate and terroir. And growing conditions. We're close to the coast, as I said, but we're also high altitude. We're a high altitude plateau with rolling hills all around the area, which gives us great benefits for different microclimates and sun exposures and different slopes and different altitudes for our vines. The DO is quite a big DO in terms of surface, but it's only 7 towns included in the DO. This is just something particular from this area of Spain, where towns are big in terms of surface. We share the territory between 2 regions in Spain, the region of Castilla-La Mancha with the province of Albacete, and with the region of Murcia. This is quite a special situation for a DO in Spain. There are only other 2 DOs that share this condition, Rioja and Cava, and this is due to, because Jumilla is actually quite an old DO, and when it was created, these 2 regions weren't actually differentiated. But well, that's politics, and let's just not talk about that. With this seminar, I would like to go over, some key elements that really make our region quite unique, such as tradition, terroir, of course, our magical landscape, human factor, and of course, our very beloved Monastrell variety. Tradition, of course, has Spanish wines, wine regions. They have a long history. But I would like to really highlight how Jumilla is actually home to one of the oldest archaeological remains of grape seeds, of Vitis vinifera grape seeds in the world. These findings confirm that 5,000-year-old grape seeds found near Jumilla town. They date from 3000 before Christ, so this is just something amazing that I like to highlight everywhere I go, because this means that grapes, Vitis vinifera grapes for wine, have been grown for over 5,000 years in Jumilla. Then of course the different civilizations that have lived in the area, all linked Mediterranean, of course, from the Iberian civilization to the Greeks, to the Phoenicians, to the Romans, of course, where the grapes and vineyards and winemaking bloomed, of course. Then, of course, the Muslim domination for 800 years in the area was huge. During this time, wine was still made, despite what one might think about alcoholic drinks in the Muslim religion. Then the real booming of the wine sector began in the early 20th century when phylloxera devastated European vineyards, and they had to, importers, wine merchants had to find wine wherever they could, and they came down to Jumilla because luckily our region was kind of an oasis for grapes to survive. And phylloxera didn't really spread out much in the region, so it was one oasis for grapes and for winemaking. So wine merchants came to Jumilla looking for our wines, and especially the French kind of industrialized in a way the wine sector of the region. And that's when, Jumilla wine came from something more of a house thing to real industry. Then in the 1960s, the DO was officially created, and the Regulatory Council, which I represent, was created. And this wine industry was, of course, more linked to bulk wine, but in the past 25 years there has been a very impressive work by winemakers and by wineries, and the shift has now been total to 100% bulk wines. Now, talking more about our very distinct and unique terroir, I'd like to show you how our climate is being close to the Mediterranean. It has a very distinct continental aspect. The summer can be very hot, of course, but the winters are really cold, with usual frosts, with usual snows in the month of January and February, and with average temperature of 60 degrees. It has semi-arid conditions. It rains really poorly in Jumilla, only under 12 inches per year. Especially this year, we've lived like the whole country and the whole continent of Europe, quite severe drought. But luckily our vines are more adapted than other places in Spain. So the harvest is going to be a little lower, but not as desperately lower as other parts of Spain. Apart from this scarce and irregular rainfall, we have strong winds that keep the vines healthy. We have morning fogs that refresh the plants as well, especially in the very hot mornings of summer days. And where we would like to call us, of course, the wines of the sun, thanks to these over 3,000 hours of sunlight, sunshine per year. Regarding our altitude and our soils, as I said before, we lay on a high plateau over 1,300 feet above sea level. This is the lowest area of the DO, but it can go as high as 2,900 feet above sea level. And the many mountain ranges that cross and rolling hills that cross the region gave us very nice variability of slopes, sun exposures, and soil types. The geology of our mountains is mostly limestone, so our soils are mostly calcareous and with stony limestone-based crust, but we can find many sandy soils on the bottom of the valleys. Well, this was because the region millions and millions of years ago was covered by a sea, the Tethys Sea. And the sandy soils is also one of the reasons why Phylloxera didn't spread out in the region, because you know how this bug doesn't like all sandy soils, and this together with the big spacing between vines, well, this just doesn't help the bug to get to live well in the area. Also, like a very interesting note about Jumilla is that we have some small volcanic areas. So we have some volcanic soils and some wines, not tasted today, but one day I hope that you'll taste them. So we have 3 or 4 different wines in the region that are made from these volcanic vineyards. However, the soils, as I said, they're mostly calcareous, very good drainage, high calcium content, and area. There are over 55,000 acres of vineyard in the region, mostly traditionally bush vine conduction. Very little trellis vines, mostly for the foreign varieties that have been planted in the region for the last 40 to 30 years. So the vineyard is mostly dry farm, non-irrigated. Depends only on the little scarce rainfall that falls every year. So the vines are highly adapted to drought, and thus climate change, of course, is something that worries us, and we're all trying to figure out how to adapt to the varying conditions in terms of temperature, especially, but in terms of drought. Well, for the moment, especially Monastrell is highly adapted to this lack of water. These conditions they make for very, very low yields, as little as 4 to 4.5 pounds per bush vine, and especially with older vines and engrafted vines, that it's one of the true heritages of Jumilla. We have over 1,000 acres.
So just a couple of things to add, some ahas for you to think about, and that was very thorough. I'm seeing that she covered this, she covered that, she covered everything. It's great. A few things. First of all, Jumilla was pulled out of a Cracker Jack box. The appellation, as you know, has been around since 1966, but it's only recently that people have A, begun to discover it, B, that there's really been a push towards quality towards bottled wines, towards domain wines, not just purely co-op wines. Second of all, don't underestimate this sort of raised plateau with the proximity to the water that she's talking about. All of us who are from California, where I am, we consider like super high altitude to be like 1,800 feet, where Spring Mountain is. The vineyards here start at 1,000 feet and go upwards to 3,000 plus. High thermal amplitude or diurnal exchange, those extremes in temperature differences, elongate the growing season, are very helpful in more arid conditions and drought conditions, and allow for phenolic development without sugar development. So having that altitude in concert with those temperatures is a very powerful thing. It's also important that she points out that the fog is there, because we don't think about it, we only think of precipitation, but there is a certain amount of absorption that goes through the leaves and things like that. So moisture is actually pulled from the air, and by the way, from the ground. We don't talk about ground moisture as well too, but fog actually contributes to ground moisture, and ground moisture is really important if you're from Kansas, Missouri, or somewhere in the Midwest, where the ground moisture is drying up and you're going to become Arizona. In the next 30 years, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The last thing I would point out, in addition to what she was talking about with the water, is that chalky soils, broken down limestone, etc., is very good for water retention. So although you have sands and a lot of porosity, you do have the ability to retain water as well, which is important. And then finally, last but not least, this combination of air and temperature and all the things, the high altitude, etc., are the absolute perfect conditions for organic viticulture, something I know she's going to talk about later. And for all of us for whom sustainability and organics are increasingly important, Jumilla is a really good place to source your wine. So, voila.
Thank you, Evan. Absolutely agree with everything you said. And true, I'm going to talk to you about organic. Some of the wines you're going to taste or are already tasting are organic. And yeah, I'm going to, well, all of what I've talked about is really the reason why Jumilla is a haven for organic agriculture. I mean, growers have worked organically without knowing it was organic, you know, before the term organic was even implemented for hundreds of years. And well, now of course certification is a key element for marketing as well. So certified vineyards and certified wineries in organic are really on demand now. Just something that really, I think it's something that you're going to really, I hope you feel when you drink the wines, is the Jumilla wines are also wines for their, very linked to their habitat, to their landscape, to the very true Mediterranean plants and shrublands and trees that all grow around the area, like rosemary, thyme, oregano, sparta grass, which actually was a huge industry some years ago in the area. And when you visit the region, you really get this Mediterranean aura all around, and the combination of the vineyard, the olive groves, and the almond trees are just something very unique and very powerful for our eyes and for all our senses, of course. So there's some examples of these high mountains that surround all the area, and some of the vineyards are planted on the lower parts, such as this picture, but also on the slopes and higher altitudes. And well, Jumilla wouldn't be what it is just because of the terroir and the vines. You only, of course, you need the human factor, and you need the love and care and hard work of the over 1,600 vine growers, and of course the work of the wineries. They all combine tradition and innovation, and share their passion for the traditional bush vine and non-irrigated vineyards, and highlight, of course, the work of the Regulatory Council that I represent, because we are in charge of course, defending the name of Jumilla, of promoting everywhere we go, but most importantly, of quality control, of origin certification, and that's our main duty. And we work as hard as we can to guarantee consumers that the wines we're drinking have this really strict quality control measures, and that they follow all the regulations put in place by the same vine growers and wineries, who of course are the ones who make up for the deal. The deal is made from growers and wineries together. Sorry. And now let's just talk about our really the queen of grapes in Jumilla, Monastrell. Monastrell, known of course as Mourvedre and Madaro here, I believe, in California, especially. Monastrell is our very true jewel in Jumilla. It covers over 75% of the vineyard. It's our very indigenous variety, is the best adapted grape to our climate conditions, and our soils, and everything I've talked about before. Drought, thanks to this severe adaptation to the hard conditions of Jumilla, this year's harvest is going to be, I think, 20% maybe maybe 25% lower than normal, which is not that much given the hard circumstances of this, especially the summer. And already, Monastrell, which is the name I'd like you all to leave this seminar today, Monastrell from hoo-mil-luh, really delivers wines with strong personality. Here you have 7 out of the 8 wines are Monastrell based. Some of them 100%, some of them nicely blended with some foreign, let's say French and Spanish varieties, which have also adapted really well to our special terroir. And then you have a 100% Syrah, I believe, which is a Syrah Jumilla, which I like to call. It's very different to the Rhone Syrah, and has been also adapted really, really well to our terroir. So, but Monastrell, of course, is the shining star in the region, and the variety to which we all hold very strongly because we feel very linked to its power and to its huge potential in international markets like here in the USA, in New York City. As I said, there are other grapes that are included in our technical file, 8 reds and 8 whites. Some of them are more indigenous than others, like, for example, Garnacha Tintorera in reds, or Airén, Macabeo, or Moscatel in whites, but we have throughout the years included some other varieties which have really show a great potential and a great good adaptation to our weather, our climate conditions and soils, and of course which are very demanded in international markets. And let's not forget that apart from making the wine, one needs to sell it, and to sell these amazing wines, well, why not blend, for example, this jewel that we have, Monastrell, with Cabernet Sauvignon or with Syrah, for example. And as Evan pointed out, well, we have the best conditions, I like to say, in Spain for organic agriculture, not only for grape, for vineyard, but all of the other crops that are grown in hoo-mil-luh are certified organic. Over 70% of the vineyard is certified, and the rest that is not certified is mostly organic, although not certified yet or undergoing the certification process. The natural conditions are just ideal for organic farming. The absence of humidity, which can be, well, of course, it's kind of difficult for yields. It's great for healthy vines, for no need to use pesticides or anything like that. The dry farming, the bush vines, well, they make for the best for organic growing. Hoo-mil-luh's certification in organic has been one of the first in Spain. Over 15 to 20 years ago, they started certifying their wines. And it's not only organic, it's sustainability in general, sustainable management with very low use of inputs, from chemicals to plowing to just some manure from the indigenous, also sheep and goats that live in the area, and no irrigation, no chemicals, so it's very low inputs, and make for the best and healthiest environment possible, which is just great for our natural biodiversity and the natural flora and fauna of the area. And just to give you a big overview, very short overview, that hoo-mil-luh is really export oriented. Almost 70% of the production goes to export markets, being the USA, actually, our main market, followed by Germany, China, UK, and Canada, so huge wine consumers in the world. And as you see today, all of the wines we're tasting are red, and that's just really coherent with the amount of red wine production, that we produce in the area, which is over 90% of the overall production. And I'm just going to shut up now and leave you to Evan to taste, because I could just go on and go on, and we're here also to enjoy the wines. And
thank you, Carolina, and that's a fabulous overview to the region too. I hope that you are excited. If you don't know hoo-mil-luh, you should be excited. This is a template for our future as the world dries up, as the world becomes more like hoo-mil-luh, particularly in other wine producing regions. Hoo-mil-luh is indeed a model going forward, both in terms of how they vinify, organic sustainability, grape choices that make sense for the environment, wine styles that make sense for the people, and thinking forward. So if you haven't become a fan of hoo-mil-luh, an FOJ, you should be, and this tasting is our way of helping you do that. So with everything Carolina's just said in mind, a couple of thoughts. First of all, before we start tasting, which we're going to do, you do have a little bit of a food component there, not that we're not going to feed you today, but everybody has a little corneta in front of them, and I just wanted to go through what you have in your corneta so that you know as you're sort of breaking it down. On the very top of it, because we love you, because you rate well, you have some jamon, but it's jamon iberico. It's not Serrano, so you get quote-unquote the good stuff, not that Serrano isn't good, but Iberico is nice, obviously coming from Iberian pigs in southwestern Spain and southeastern Portugal, and eating acorns all the time. Cool pigs eating acorns, aged for somewhere between 18 and 48 months. I mean, how could it not be good? So enjoy your jamon. And then on top of that, we have 3 cheeses that are layered, one on top of the other. And they start at the top with morcilla. Morcilla is a goat cheese made with red wine wash. It is of the region. It is of the Murcian goat. The Murcian goat, if you've ever seen them, is one that does extremely well in hot, dry climates. It is very productive. It's adapted for the climates. It puts out 1 gallon of milk a day. So if you've seen these big goats carrying around all this weight and wondering how do they do it, they get milked a lot, and they make a lot of cheese there. But the cheese itself goes back to the 80s. It probably is true that somebody accidentally dropped a wheel of cheese into the wine. They pulled it out later. It tasted great, but it's really become from sort of an oddity to sort of very much signature of the area, and very much part of Murcia's culture, hoo-mil-luh being partially Murcian. We thought that would be a fun wine to do. In the middle is Manchego. Manchego is a DOP cheese that can only be made from Manchego sheep, and they graze throughout the areas again, interestingly enough, of Albacete, moving south towards La Mancha, and then pushing up there. So that's a 60-day to 2-year old age sheep cheese. Very good, a little bit pungent, flavorful, but a different contrast to the Murcian cheese, which has a little bit more sweetness and texture to it. And they get a little bit granular. They get that crunchy thing like old aged Gouda does with time, that I think makes those little pours delightful and really good by itself for when you have honey or nuts or almonds or marmalada or something like that. And then on the very bottom, that large sort of beige cheese is mahon. Mahon is our cow cheese there, so we've got cow, sheep, and goat, and pigs, all covered in one little corneta. And you'll enjoy that. Obviously, it's a classic cheese as well too, critical to the Balearic Islands, now from Menorca, pretty much exclusively, delicious, aged as well too. This one's cured, which is sort of brushed with olive oil, which gives it that sort of shiny sheen on the outside, flaky, salty, contrasting, delicious. So with that said, let's move to wine number 1. I thought this would be a fun wine. Actually, I should say Carolina would thought this would be a fun wine. But we pulled together an interesting array. This is a great starting wine. It's called the Pajes de Valle Winery. It's Organic 2020. This is a wine that is in fact 100% Monastrell. It is by, I don't want to say young vines. It's 15 to 30-year-old vines, but by hoo-mil-luh standards, that can be considered young. Many of them are 80, 90, 100 years plus. This wine is done in stainless steel, and some maybe a little bit of cement, but it's really about preserving the purity of the fruit. So if you're trying to get your arms around what Mourvedre, Monastrell, Mataró tastes like, this is going to be a beautiful example of it. The winemaker is also, I think, indicative of what's going on. Maria Jover is just less than 30 years old. She's part of this new young revolution of Murcian hoo-mil-luh winemakers there, does a great job and is all about preserving the purity of the fruit. What I enjoy about this wine, in addition to being pure, fresh, clean, etc., it's made with native fermentation, so it's really all about its place, expressive of the variety, etc., and again, stainless steel, still a little bit crunchy, nice acids, but again, it's a warm area, so they're not piercing on you, and just delicious. But the concept of this wine, which is very true throughout Rumilla, is a concept called topography, which is to say that old vineyards are rented by wineries, and you literally, essentially manage the vineyard, rent the vineyard from the vineyard holder. They do what you want, they grow the fruit, and in return you give a percentage back to them, which I presume you can give to them in grapes, wine, money, whatever they prefer, roughly 7%. So it preserves the patrimony of vineyards moving forward, it preserves old vines, it ensures people have work, it ensures the farmers are taken care of, and it's a system I wish we would actually develop here in the country. Delicious wine, great kickoff, and one that, by the way, because it's in stainless steel, it's not uber tannic and it's vinified in a very approachable way. Throw that in a nice bucket for 10 minutes at the beginning of the summer, you'll be a very, very happy camper. Yeah, no, the ABV on this wine is 13.5, so it's very approachable, not super tannic, not overly alcoholic, and I wouldn't call it a porch pounder. I could do that, never on. All right, let's move on to the second wine. The second wine is from Bodega Cerón. This is a wine they called La Serville 2021. It comes specifically from the Fuente Alamo zone, and it comes from higher altitude vineyards, as you can see in your slide there, at over 3,000 feet. Once again, I consider high altitude to be 1,800 feet, so you get the additions of that, the brighter acid, the crisper, the longer growing season. This is a wine that is 96% Monastrell or Mourvedre and 4% other. Let me tell you about the other, because rather than being international grapes, this wine shows respect to the locality. The primary blending grape here is one called Blanquilla, B-L-A-N-Q-U-I-L-L-A, also known as Verdosia, which is a local grape of vines that are older. There's another one called Moravia Agria, which comes from La Mancha originally, which has done well. Again, the proximity to La Mancha is very close by. And then a third grape called Rojal. So this is all local grape. This is all truly, if you think about Rhone being Rhone blend, this is a hoo-mil-luh blend of all local grapes. I think the wines add, even 4% adds complexity here. And coming off of the first wine, brilliantly placed, it actually allows you to see what these other grapes do within it. This wine spent about a dozen months in frutelas, 500 liters, most of them used, unfined, unfiltered, and comes from a family that's been in winemaking for some time. The Ceban family has been cultivating since the late 1800s. They're in multiple generations now, and this relationship has passed on, and rather than selling all of their fruit, which is very traditional in Spain in 2004, consistent with what Carolina was saying about moving towards bottled wine, they have moved over towards bottled wine, and their primary working with family, Lucia and Carlos' siblings, Juanjo Cedran is the fourth generation making the wines today.
And just to add an anecdote, La Serville, the name comes from, that's the name of the plot where the grapes come from. And La Serville means that how can I say that it's a plot that always delivered, because this field land means that every year, no matter how the vintage came, the climate, the weather conditions, the plot always delivered. So it's a kind of an homage also to how this plot was kept by and taken care by the grandfathers and grandmother,
right.
Because it always delivered. It was a plot that was really generous in a way.
So technically, this is a vino di Pacca. This is a single
Yes.
vineyard wine. So if you're following all your law changes these days, the whole idea of individual vineyards being recognized especially for quality, not purely for marketing. This is a great vineyard of the patrimony of the vineyard over time. What's very interesting here is how those other varieties really pop. Most of you probably had Mourvedre before. You're familiar with, Bagnola, something like that. You used to sort of like that cracked black peppercorn element of it, which you don't really get in the first wine, but pops in the second wine, and I really actually believe that's a combination of vinification, obviously a little bit of large barrel, but also the other varieties bringing forward that very sort of spicy Monastrell character up to the forefront. And again, even though you're expecting this wine to be sort of a monster wine, it really isn't. It's quite tame. It's quite delicious. I don't have the alcohol on it. Their fact sheet wasn't necessarily that giving there, but it doesn't come off as hot. It doesn't come off as too big. And it's, again, very delicious wine.
It would be around 14 to 14.5.
Yeah, which is... Doesn't feel like it at all. And, you know, and by the way, for those of you going, God, it doesn't feel like it. You can have 16.5% Zinfandel. It doesn't taste hot if the winemaker knows what the hell they're doing. So let's move on to wine number 3. And by the way, wine number 2, you're lucky to have it. We had some issues with customs, and we managed to squeak it through.
Yeah, it's quite a miracle that we are tasting this wine today. Really,
single vineyard, single miracle. Wine number 3 is a wine from Bodegas Luzon. This is called the Altos de Luzon wine. It is a 100% Monastrell, 100% organic, also coming from a single plot. So not only single vineyard, or Vino de Pajare, but a plot within your vineyard called the Madera plot, which is a over 40-year-old dry farmed plot within that. Comes from the subzone of Venta del Puerto. Vineyards at about 2,200 feet, so once again, strong thermal amplitude. Subtle, not too much. Combination of French and American. This is a winery that actually is indeed cooperative based. It dates back to 1916 when a handful of growers and winemakers got together to sort of start the roots, the initiations of that, and it has been growing upwards over time, expanding until it hit sort of its apogee at about 2000, which is where it is today. They have about 1,500 acres of vineyards, primarily in Monastrell, but I think very much speaks to classic farming, bush farming, winemaking, etc.
Actually, the name of Luzon, which is the name of the winery, Bodegas Luzon, comes from the original first owner of the winery, of the state, who came from the Philippines. You know how the Philippines 200 years ago were under Spanish domination, and Luzon is an island of Philippines. And when this Jumillano came back to his town, to his hometown, to Jumilla, he wanted to pay homage also to where he had lived for so long, in the Luzon island in the Philippines, so far away. And yeah, that's where the name comes from. And actually, they have now launched a new brand under the name of Origin of Luzon, which is also a tribute to this 200-year-old link to the Philippines.
Yeah, the Philippines, by the way, for those of you who are wanting some trivia stuff that you can play on Trivia Night, largest importer of sherry outside of Spain is the Philippines. It's a huge Spanish wine market, and particularly a huge sherry market, and a place that equally loves roasted pig a lot too. So it makes sense that they share that, and that's something you didn't know before you walked in. What's interesting here is that you can start to see that oak playing in, more that sort of signature of many parts of Spain. A little bit of the vanilla that comes in from the American oak, a little bit of spiciness coming in from the French oak as well too. Layered, I think, very well on top of the quality of fruit. A little bit more generosity in this wine, sits at about 14.5% alcohol, but also quite creamy. A little bit of bite of tannin in the end, but delicious and very humillano, as they would say. So
organic too. So the three of the three wines we've tasted are organic.
Absolutely. Very cool. Let's move on to wine 4, sensitive to your time, and the fact that you've got other wines there too. This comes from a great family-owned producer and a powerhouse within Spain, particularly with the area of Murcia, and that is from the Van a winery. This is their silver label wine, 2019. They are, again, 4th generation, family-owned winery, and they are also, a lot of you may not be familiar with everything they do, but they make a couple of wines called Nido and Clio, which are effectively cult wines within the local area, as well as offering wines that are more everyday drinking, enjoyable, something like that. This wine sits sort of in the middle. This comes from very, very old dry farmed vineyards and comes off chalky soils. and non-irrigated vines, stainless steel, fermented, finished in oak, 50% alcohol, a little bit more generosity, but really, I think very much where that sort of sweet spot of what Carolina was talking about before, of where modernity and heritage meet together. Juan Gil does a wonderful job in that regard. And like I said, does that for a long time. The last thing that's sort of interesting, again, is modernity hits tradition, is they literally go through, again, an optical sorting machine. So literally they go through grape cut by grape, pull things out, pull out the raisins, make sure everything's doing well. And their wines are pristine and precise. And I think you could say that about everything they make.
This winery, together with Luthon, the previous one, are both certified under the certification of wineries for climate action. There are only, I think, there are only a handful wineries in Spain certified with this climate change certification. So they're very, very working very hard to adapt their wineries to have like zero emissions and contribute the best they can to climate change fight.
What's interesting here, again, as we sort of move back and forth, because I mean, obviously all the wines are rich and generous and powerful. This wine sort of pulls that sweet spot of, again, lifting a little bit of that peppery character that we talked about before, but it's also more floral. Than the other ones, a lot of blue and purple flowers in the wine. And you also find, I don't know, in France they call it garrigue, you know, that thing of the rum, they just sort of like underbrush and herbs and all of those other things. They don't have that special sparta grass that we talked about before. But I don't know if there's a term in Spain that's used that's like the equivalent of what the rum people would call it garrigue, or sort of garriga term or whatever. But it's a very interesting, and you pick a note of that up in this wine too. So if you were to imagine what Roman garrigue would taste like in Spain, that's it. That's that undercurrent of wine. It picks up on that sort of scrubrush, herbal, local grasses thing, along with the floral, along with the fruit, along with that, and just precisely brilliantly architected wine. So
in Spanish we call it balsamico, but I'm not sure in English that term is equally
balsamico has so many other elements to it. It's not that, so we'll just call it scrubrush, underbrush, garrigue. We'll just embrace that term. All right, let's move on to wine 5. So this will be the first wine in the front row to you on the far left. And this is a wine from Familia Pacheco. This is a wine called Barrica. Barrica, appropriately named because the wine is spent some time in oak. And I moved my order for that. So I changed my orders here. And the wine's 14.5% alcohol. This is a blend of Monastrell, but as Carolina pointed out before, some of these grapes are sort of playing with this tip of the straw hat to other parts of the world. So this wine has Cabernet Sauvignon in it, it has Syrah in it as well too. And what's interesting is the grapes are vinified differently. So all the Monastrell is non-irrigated, traditional, bush vines, Goblet, etc. The Syrah and Cabernet are trellis. They use a little bit of drip irrigation, kind of add this thing, so it's sort of, again, once where old meets new, where modern meets all of that. The specific subzones are different as well too, with the Syrah and Cabernet coming from a different altitude, different plot than the old vine Monastrell comes to. All of the wines are assembled together. They've spent about 5 months in 300-liter oak, older oak, a second and third use on it. And this is again coming from the original 42 acres of organically cultivated wines that they have. The winemaker's name is Elena, that makes sense. And she's been doing a really good job over time showing how she can express the individuality of Monastrell, showing it with other varietals, etc.
This winery is actually located in the southwest, the area more to the south of the DO with the lowest altitude. But as you pointed out, Elena likes to play and study Monastrell at its best, and she's also working on this collection of wines from different plots all around the DO at different altitudes and soils called Brumas, the collection of Brumas. And they're 100% Monastrell wines, which I invite you to try because it's really like a thesis, a real hard study on Monastrell expression at different altitudes and different soils.
And this is truly a family affair. Don't let Elena take all of the credit. Her mother helps out, her sisters help out with this, an all-female team, which I think in this day and age is really cool and really happening, and it expresses the wine beautifully. Barrica, interestingly enough, speaks probably to the barrel, right? To the barrica, the size of the barrels and everything that we're talking about. So the next wine is, that old adage of Sesame Street, one of these things is not like the other, one of these things just doesn't belong. This is the 100% Syrah that Carolina referred to the other day. This is from Bodegas Cartiello. The wine is called Altico. It is a 100% Syrah. It comes from a vineyard, a single vineyard, so again, a Pajare or a Viñedo Singular. It comes off of the north slope of the Sierra del Carche, limestone swales, 12 months in small French barrique, and is treated very much like a different, more international vein, but still screams Spain to me. It actually screams the area there. What's very interesting about it, and perhaps what you could, as we're tasting the wine, allude to it, is this wine, technically, by being 100% Syrah, is it an appellation? Is it a PDO hoo-mil-luh wine, or does it carry an IG because of the fact that it's 100% non-native variety?
No, even. You don't need to be 100 or Monastrell based to be hoo-mil-luh, PDO. I mean,
anything can be.
Exactly. Of course,
inclusive culture, we like that.
We are very democratic, and we like to include everyone, especially if they do amazing wines like Altico here. This is, I think it's actually the only single variety Syrah we have in the deal. So I think it's also a brave wine for someone to have in Jumilla, where it's the land of Monastrell, right?
There you go. And what's interesting here, what makes sense, sort of very much the way the Portuguese would blend Alicante Boucher with Syrah and Alentejo. Here it makes sense for the territory. It makes sense as a complementary grape when you're thinking again the spiciness of Syrah, the spiciness of Monastrell, the grapes that you have in the region. It doesn't feel out of place. In fact, if somebody just handed this to you wine and said, well, Mia, you probably think it was more effective, you probably think it was Monastrell, although the profile obviously is somewhat different and has that sort of slightly different peppery element to it. Also, the tannins are a bit grippier in the wine, a little bit more astringent. By nature, obviously, it's a wine that not only craves food, recommend you take this glass to the paella bar when you're done, but also a wine that is a Vaticar. It's a wine that the wine I put it aside for a while. And an interesting thing to try, if you haven't had pure Syrah from Jumilla before, this would be sort of a semi-unicorn wine, right?
Absolutely.
When we play with it. So, moving on to our seventh wine here. This is a wine called Goru, made from the Ego, Bodegas Ega. It is Monastrell, blended with, again, Syrah, Petit Verdot. It's a more generous wine. It's about 15% alcohol. It's a selection of their best grapes, so literally a plot selection, varietal selection within that. 50 years old, low yielding vines, not unusual in the appellation, and vineyards that are almost approaching 3,000 feet. So you get extremes of that. I think you'll taste it, certainly not only the generosity of the alcohol, but in the refreshing nature of how the wine comes off, the freshness there. 19 months in a combination of French and American smaller oak, and a very sumptuous wine. I mean, I think that I was expecting more power and more angularity. The wine is sort of sumptuous, sort of ethereal in that regard. Santos Ortiz is the winemaker of Spanish origin. His business partner and winemaking partner is a woman by the name of Iona Banoescu, who's from Romania. And they started this winery from scratch in 2011. And they farm 25 acres of 50-year-old plus vines organically. They're located actually relatively close to the village town city of Jumilla. It's not that big.
It is.
It is that big? Okay, city of Jumilla town, Jumilla world.
Jumillanos like to call it pueblo, but I mean, coming from Madrid, it's actually a small city.
Okay, and it gives you a different approach, and again, sort of the outsider sensibility towards looking at grape with a different set of eyes, and a fresh set of eyes, and having a Spanish partner. So truly an international wine in that regard, and another fun take. Anything else to add on this one?
Well, this is really a winery that will be studied, I think, in marketing schools, because it's only a 10-year-old winery, and they've done an amazing job with, of course, great raw material. They bought the some of the best plots in Jumilla. They source other grapes from amazing plots in Jumilla, and in only 10 years, well, what they have achieved is just amazing.
And what's really amazing here, and I said sumptuous for a region, the mouthfeel on this wine is spectacularly good. You have grip, you have tannin, you have the ability to age, but there's almost a creaminess, a crop to the wine, which I think is unique within the other cultures, not dependent purely on the oak, but obviously respecting the vinification there, and making the wine just very sort of seductive, inviting, delicious, all those other good things. Must be the Romanian in them, right? Bringing that to the table. And last but certainly not least, we want to finish with a little treat. We're staying in the land of Monastrell. We're staying in the land of Jumilla, but we're giving you a sweet wine. And for a lot of you, if you jumped ahead a little bit earlier, whoa, what's going on here? And this is a Monastrell dulce being the word sweet. In Spanish, 2017 vintage from the Bodegas Olivares. This is one that comes off of, again, a single plot of sandy and chalky soils called the Olla Santa Ana vineyard, and it's made only a couple of times a decade. This is not a wine that's made every year. You need the conditions to be correct. The fruit quality needs to be correct for late harvesting, needs to be correct. And this wine is made by a process called moutage, so they're adding spirit into it to finish here. Obviously, it's a fairly high sweetness wine to begin with, but they call it sort of a demi-moutage at the end to preserve it. It's then aged in concrete vats and bottled for 2 years, and just shows a whole different soil character, grape character, personality character, and this particular vineyard, the Olla Santa Ana, is one of the highest vineyards in the entire appellation. So you could truly say you're at the mountaintop. You could say it's your favorite wine on the flight, I might add. And while this wine is an incredible wine, they're probably frankly more known for their dry wines than their sweet wines, but we just thought this would be a treat and a fun way to finish your tasting. So if you've had a chance to try it. The question was, do we know the sugar? About 200 grams per liter of sweetness. Anyway, a fun way to finish that. And what I would suggest is twofold. I'm going to give the liberty of the fact that Carolina deserves the full hour of what we're doing. We're a couple minutes short. If there's one or two questions about Jumilla, the wines, the wineries, we've excited you enough to go to Bar C over in the main room and go tell Carolina afterwards. Happy to answer them. Yeah, question over there. Yeah, absolutely. The question is Carolina, your question about indigenous or being native to the region. Did it come originally from Spain and was brought over to France and they claimed it, or does it actually found its way over from France into what was then Iberia at that time?
No, it's actually from Spain, and then it went to France. Actually, Mourvedre is the ancient name of a city in the coast of Spain, very close to Jumilla, called Sagunto, and which in the Middle Ages was called Murviedro. Okay, so this is like just the real history. The real history that it's truly Spanish, and then from the port traveled to the Mediterranean area of France.
Just like they did with Carignan, and just like they did with Garnacha. What can we say about our French friends, anyway? One other question? Time for one other question? Anybody else? All right, well, if not, what I would ask you to do in closing today, don't forget to fill out your 2 pieces of paper. Our team at the front will collect them on the way out the door. We have a team at the front collecting papers. Yes, I think we do. You wanted to consider for that educational trip potentially down the road? Please do so. I would encourage you again to continue your study of Jumilla with Carolina, who will have ample time to speak with you over at Bar C in the banner room. I want to thank you for your time, for your attention. I hope you finished your wines, you finished your corneta. If you can help us by dumping whatever leftover wine that you haven't drunk into your spit cups, that will expedite our session for César afterwards, and we will see you inside the tasting afterwards. Thank you again for attending the Jumilla seminar.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
I hope you learned learned something about hoo-mil-luh and the wines that are produced in that region of France. They are really wonderful, whether it's a blend or straight Monastrell or Syrah. I really enjoyed the wines of the masterclass and actually at the tasting outside as well. I'm really falling in love with all Spanish wines, but that's a personal thing. But I do hope when you're out there and you're in the liquor store or in your wine store, you reach for a bottle from that region, you won't be disappointed. And being right now, it is the end of October, these wines will be great for Thanksgiving. So I'm Debbie Giaquindo. I'm the Hudson Valley Wine Goddess. Please rate this podcast on whatever the podcast platform you are listening to this on. You can find me at HudsonValleyWineGoddess.com. I'm on Facebook as Hudson Valley Wine Goddess, and I'm on Twitter and Instagram as HV Wine Goddess. And you can reach me by email at Debbie, DEBBIE, at HudsonValleyWineGoddess.com. Have a wonderful day.